You're about to listen to the Complete Developer Podcast, the podcast by coders, for coders, about all aspects of life as a developer.
I'm Will, the curmudgeonly experienced developer.
And I'm Beej, the optimistic newbie developer. Welcome to another episode of Complete Developer Podcast. This week, we're talking about putting yourself out there using social media to further your career. A good portion of the content was derived from Brad and Deborah Shep's book, How to Find a Job on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. We'll look at using social media for networking and connecting with others in the industry, keeping up with the current trends, and becoming a resource for others. Social media changes rapidly. So with this episode, we'll mostly keep it to strategies that will help you no matter the platform, with as few specific references as possible. But before we get started, Will, what have you been fighting this week?
I am looking for a crash course in agricultural economics.
Really?
Yes. And the reason is my side project. Of course, we got a lot of the agricultural trading bits and pieces in there, and it's rapidly getting to the point where like the baseline of what we need is in place. And now the larger business model is getting a little hard for me to understand because it's dealing with all of the, the futures trading and the, buying options and all that, which I get the rough gist of it, but like way down in the guts of it, I don't. So I'm trying to find something some resources where I can actually just kind of cram for it. And maybe that will put me in a better place because right now I'm at the point where I feel like I don't understand. I don't even know what I don't know. And I need to get to the point where I'm first order ignorant, at least. And so I'm kind of looking for that.
And get those points where you're third and fourth order ignorant, up to at least second order.
Yeah, I mean, because there's a lot of this stuff that I am pretty clueless about, how all the mechanics of the market actually work. And so that's what I'm looking into. Side project, it heats up again a little bit and then it cools off a little bit, then it heats up again. I'm not really sure what all's going on with that at this point. There's a number of interested parties. I think we're close to 100 clients in there now.
Nice.
Yeah, because that's tripled since the last time I gave an update on it. Mm-hmm. But we're still working on the whole revenue bits and pieces for various reasons, and the system is getting more and more complex, and there's a lot of moving parts that I've got to get my head around. So that's where I am. How about you?
Well, I want to start off by saying congrats to the Cleveland Cavaliers. This episode's going to come out well after the NBA Finals, but we're recording the day after, and so this is the first Cleveland team to win any type of championship in over 30 years.
Wow.
And I know my sister has been posting lots of pics of the celebrations up there. I am still playing rounds of phone tag with recruiters.
And you always will be.
Well, I told you all about the job that I was offered, but then told I couldn't start right away. So I've been trying to get a hold of the recruiter there. We've kind of been missing each other. Like I'll call and leave him a message, and then he'll call me while I'm at work, and I can't answer my phone, and so it's just back and forth. But I'm hoping to get some paperwork, basically to just guarantee employment for when they can bring me on. Until then, I'm treating it like it's still up in the air.
Yeah. Really, until you're sitting at your desk on the first day, it doesn't exist.
No. That's about all I've got going on. Let's go ahead and roll the music and get into some IoTs. This week for IoTs, I have kind of a project that is not directly an IoT project, but can be made into one. And this is the Infinity Mirror Box. Now, an infinity mirror, for those that don't know, is actually multiple mirrors set up in a recursive manner. And this project uses window tinting to create a partial reflection for one side of the recursion. it involves creating a cube frame for the mirrors and then attaching LED strips between the mirror and the Perspex surface or plexiglass surface that you put the window tinting on. It's pretty cool. To make it IoT, it's really just a great starting point for lots of different IoT ideas. I thought about taking an Arduino, making it so you could control the colors and the blinking of the LED strips. Or to get even fancier, you could take a Raspberry Pi and replace one of the mirrors with a small flat monitor and then put all the components inside the box. So you have this like really futuristic looking computer box.
Interesting. I'd like to see how that looks. That's
there's images on the website. So
yeah, I mean, what you were describing though.
Oh, what I'm describing? Yeah, I think it'd be really cool.
Yeah, because it's a lot harder to visualize that particular.
Yeah. So for this, the hardware you need is pretty simple, just wood, 5 or 6 mirrors, depending on if you want to make it setting on a stand or you want to make it a true cube, LED strips, and the amount or the length is going to depend on the size of the box that you build, wires, adhesives, Perspex, which is the plexiglass that's about this. It's going to have to be the same size as the mirrors, car window tint film, and then to make it IoT, an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi for the controller. Now, they do suggest having a laser cutter to cut the wood.
Okay.
And there is some soldering involved.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so we know this project might be a little dangerous for Will.
Yeah, you know what you could almost do? Like looking at the pictures, I'm almost visualizing like some really you could make a trippy little like a coffee table.
Oh, that would be huge, but that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is like something that you would totally do.
Yeah, it is.
Because I think the people that don't know you very well don't realize how permanently interleaved coffee is with your life.
Yeah, I used to host an event every Tuesday night called Coffee Night, spelled
with a K.
Yeah, with a K for the yeah.
Is that like your Ren Fair reenactment group sipping coffee?
Not really. You were there for several of them.
Yeah, I was.
That was actually back before your daughter was born.
Yeah. Wow, that's been a long time.
What happened was a group of us used to go hang out at coffee shops, and our favorite place closed down, and we just didn't have a central place to hang out. I lived pretty centrally, and so I have 3 coffee pots and 2 espresso machines. So I just had everybody over and
went ahead with it.
Yeah. And we didn't always drink coffee. Sometimes there was...
Yeah, but you need to make a coffee table like this.
Yeah.
Somehow. Sure. That's...
Yeah. All right. So who's talking to us this week?
Well, Brandy Young of Big Active Audience actually mentioned us in a blog post about podcast marketing tips.
Oh, yeah. What'd you say?
She said, prominently display a link to your podcast's Listen Now page on the main page for your podcast. Even better if there's an embedded player right there on the main page itself, like this beast for the Complete Developer Podcast. Which, Brandy helped us out early on in fixing a lot of our... Well, we had a lot of issues with the site early on, like
we were learning. I was just learning... WordPress. Design and WordPress when we put the site together, and we got a functional site, and then she came along and told us how to make an effective site.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think our early operating premise was, okay, it hasn't caught on fire and fallen over, so it's fine.
Exactly.
And she helped us get to the point where it was actually an asset.
Yes. And one thing that she mentioned liking from our original page was that we had the player on the front page.
Yes.
She suggested we make it a little bit more prominent, and she liked that we had 5 episodes on there. So I said, oh, you like 5? You'll love 10.
Yeah.
Which was true. I mean, you can go on there and listen to the 10 most recent episodes right on our front page. So Thanks, Brandy. We really do appreciate all the great advice that you've provided for us and other podcasters. We definitely have some Complete Developer swag just for you. And if you'd like a Complete Developer swag bag, leave us a review in iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play, or comment on any of our social media profiles. We post all of our shows to our Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google+.
Do we do Google+? I can't remember.
We do, but I'm not ever on there, to be honest, which is not good because the episode today is talking about social media.
Well, but...
So I want to start us off with a quote from the book that I mentioned earlier by Brad and Deborah Shep. Nearly everyone and their mothers have a Facebook page. Twitter has been credited with starting and helping broadcast revolutions. LinkedIn now has virtually no competition in the professional social networking space. So we're going to start off talking about using social media for networking and connecting with others in the industry. And a great way to do this is to join groups of local coders or language-specific groups. I know you and I are both in several groups for the Nashville area, but we're also in language-specific groups.
Yes.
As if you listen to some of our older episodes, we were joking about I posted a question that Will answered and then realized like a day or two later or an hour or two later that he answered my question.
Yeah. I do remember that. And the thing is I think you were working on my site when I did that. It's very easy to accidentally cross up. But.
Mm-hmm. The thing here is you want to put yourself in front of potential coworkers in a relaxed, positive manner.
Right.
Because different platforms have kind of different...
They've got different kind of social ways of interacting. Like the way you interact on LinkedIn is not the way you should interact on Twitter or Facebook.
Yes.
It's very different spheres and it gives a very different impression.
Mm-hmm. Also, you can find out information about the company and the culture of the company, like if you have common interests. If the working at that company is not going to be a good fit, for example, you like to go hiking every weekend and are outdoorsy and very active, and they all like to sit around and play video games and watch Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you'll find that most of the people that work at different companies, like when I do some research, because you do always do research before you go into an interview, as much as possible. Is you go on LinkedIn, you find their profiles on LinkedIn, and get some information about them, and then you go and you try to find them on Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit.
Yeah, and it's really, really helpful.
Because remember, guys, when you're interviewing with places, you're interviewing them as much as they are you.
Yes.
And so you want to know if it's going to be a good fit personality-wise, or if you're going to be constantly conflicting with, your out-of-work priorities and things like that.
Yeah, or if it's things like they're on the other end of the political spectrum and belligerent, and you see that.
Yeah, you will be able to see that in
it'll show up on Twitter so fast you won't believe it.
Exactly. The other thing is you can engage with companies that you're interested in working with. This increases your visibility to human resources and recruiters within the company. And it lets you research, like we were talking about, research the industry and the companies that you do want to work for. So when you're out there looking, or when you get calls from recruiters telling you, oh, I've got this great position at this company, if you've already been engaging with them on social media, either A, I really want to work for them and I know people there already, or I already know them and I don't want to work there because I don't think it would be a good fit for me.
Yeah, and there's 2 or 3 companies here locally that, from interactions with them on their social media profiles and interactions more really with their employees than them directly, I can tell I don't want to be there.
Also, something that Lena mentioned is that recruiters can sometimes have older resumes. Like she talked about having 10-year-old resumes in their system.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
And what you want to do with a lot of these social media, especially the more professional social media outlets, is to turn your resume into a living document that stays up to date.
Yeah. And what I do for this personally is I actually have a scheduled task that pops up and says, like I think I've got it set for like every 3 months is go update your resume.
Yeah, I know. It was the funniest thing when you did that and you'd already been working at your current position, and then it showed up in my LinkedIn feed, Will has a new position at this company. I'm like, say congrats to him. It's like, okay.
Well, you get that, and then you get that happens, and then the other thing that happens, one other thing that happens is recruiters start calling like crazy, which we'll discuss here in a minute. And the other thing that happens is people that happen to be monitoring your social media profiles for whatever reason, or something shows up in their feed, they're like, oh my goodness, he just updated his LinkedIn resume. What's going on?
No.
And so it's very easy to get misinterpreted. Of course, the other thing is, you do need to keep it up to date anyway.
Well, you need to treat your social media outlets like an online resume.
Yeah. Well, and your LinkedIn resume especially is your fire extinguisher.
Yeah. And it creates kind of a one-to-many relationship to where you can go to just a few social media outlets and update your resume on them. And that is seen by very many people. Lots of recruiters, lots of companies can see that. And so you don't have to call up or email all of these recruiting agencies and send them updated resumes. You put it on one place like LinkedIn and
they'll pull it in.
Yeah.
And, the other nice thing too is, other than the laziness factor, it's also a bit of a filtering factor, because the people that do have an old copy of the resume and don't do a good job of keeping it up are not going to be calling you after that.
Yeah.
So, they're not going to call about a 10-year-old resume, because if they have a system that's that bad, they're probably so used to it that if it doesn't change in their system, it doesn't get their attention. So you can filter out the bad recruiters if you're going for multiple.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Also, you can post recent projects or blog posts about relevant topics, and use the popularity of the social media sites to promote your posts when you write about topics that are relevant to the industry.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we do, right?
Yeah.
We post it to all of the social media.
Well, not just
possibly can.
Yeah, not just that though. Like, I write blog posts specifically for LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I also have a Medium account that I occasionally write for. I don't as much.
I don't like Medium that much.
It doesn't get as much. It's not.
It feels like it's the wrong tool for what you and I try to do.
Yeah, that's it exactly. I write more technical blog posts, and so do you.
Yeah.
And if I were writing more inspirational, that kind of stuff, then yeah, Medium would be perfect. And that's the kind of stuff I put on Medium. I don't really put code samples on Medium.
Right.
But I will put code samples on LinkedIn. Though most of the time they go on my blog, and I link them to LinkedIn. But and also Twitter, Facebook, Google+, these are all great for sharing posts. And you can also use it as like a rotating portfolio. And
you can also reshare posts later.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is a kind of huge thing.
Spin it back up, especially if it's something, like that one post that I did about how we use agile methodologies for our podcast. I posted that, and then I guess about 3 or 4 weeks later, you retweeted it and spun it back up, and I got a lot of traffic from that. And
which, the thing is like when it first came out, I'd put a note in to like, hey, repost this because this is pretty good. And then just got so far behind. I just never. And the thing is, if you have an audience that actually does retweet things, the slackers among them will make things come back up anyway. But
it's kept that post popular.
Yeah, that's probably the hottest one on your site. I've got a couple on mine that get hit like that too, that are just, and not at the level that one does. But
that one is probably one of my most. It is my most popular post, though the code kata that I did is becoming pretty popular too since we did the Code Newbie thing.
Huh.
Apparently, people are sharing that.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, especially after what you said about it. No, I'm just messing with you. It was solid code.
It was. I had to rag on you. That was it's my job.
So we've kind of started delving into the next topic, which is posting strategies to use. And I think the most important thing is don't make it all about you. Share others' content as well.
Yeah, well, and this is something I do on the GAN software systems stuff. Like I don't write blog posts very often anymore. Because between the podcast and everything else going on, it's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. But I find that I still get a whole lot of followers, and I even get retweets and likes of other people's articles. I just share stuff that I found interesting.
And I have a quote, another one from that book. It's very apparent if you have a one-sided, what's in it for me mentality. What you want to do really is follow the influencers and news sources and share the interesting stories.
Yeah.
I know. I love getting up. I got this from you. I get up in the mornings and I get on Feedly because you're the one that got me into that. And I'll go and look at the interesting news stories, read them, and then post a few.
Yeah.
And then I like to periodically look at my Twitter feed throughout the day just to see what other people are posting, because I'll come across some really interesting stuff, and I've gotten some IoTs material out of that.
Yeah. I mean, these things all feed back into each other, right? Like if you're setting up a blog, and if you have a social media presence, there's your blog topics coming in a stream right there to you. Of course, my way of using Feedly has evolved for those kind of things, because now I do it on Sunday nights for the week.
Yeah.
And
that's because we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but that's because you use Buffer that does that for you, and that's coming up in a further down in the topic, or further down in the outline.
That, and I can't control my time as well during the week. So.
Yeah. Speaking of that, though, you want to avoid bursts of activity,
right? Of actual observable activity.
Yes. Yeah, so it's really easy to get on in the mornings or evenings and share a bunch of interesting stories. I know I used to be very guilty of this, where I would get on and I would go through my feed and I would click share.
Yep.
And then if people that were following me, there'd be like 5 or 6 shares right in a row.
And then nothing.
Yeah, and then nothing all day.
12 hours after that.
Yeah, exactly.
And your posts get pushed down, and
it basically overloads people's feeds with just shares from you, and I've unfollowed people that do this.
I know. I'm actually in a Facebook group that there's a number of people that do that. They just carpet bomb the group first thing in the morning, and it's really, really depressing news, and I'm right on the edge of getting out of that, because it is awful. Even without it being depressing stuff, it's too much.
And finally, under strategies, mix your shares with personal content. Of course, remain professional when doing this, but that's kind of going to be platform dependent. So mix in your own content with your shares. Throw in some personal stuff too, so that all of your content isn't just self-promoting. It's not look at my blog post, listen to the podcast, do this, do that, but
I get emails from a guy that's like that, and it's,
like
I read them, but I never click on the links because I don't trust him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's very self-promotional, and it comes across really quick. Like a little bit goes a long way.
Yeah, exactly. Like, for example, the podcast, our Twitter feed, like we use Buffer. And like I said, we're going to talk about Buffer and some other tools a little bit later, but we use Buffer. I'll get on there in the mornings and go through and buffer, like add a bunch of stuff to our buffer for about 2 days. And then because we use the free one, so we can get up to 10. And then I'll go in and I'll add a few things from us, like, a blog post from me, or a blog post from you, or an episode, or stuff like that.
Or a quote from a podcast.
Yeah. And I'll throw that in and then mix it in so that it doesn't all come out at once, but like periodically throughout the day, it's going to pop up, it'll be, a share, and then a quote, and then another share, and then another share, and then, hey, check out this episode. And then, the next day it'll be a share and hey, check out Beej's blog post. And
here's a quote from, at GantSoftSys. And so I get like 3 or 4 new followers and I'm like, what happened? What did Beej do?
Yeah. I do that.
Yeah. Every so often you get me and I see a little spike and I'm like, okay, what happened? Oh,
I'll tell you what happens is when I'm writing the show notes, because I do those. Typically, it's on Wednesday nights that I do that, but sometimes I'll want to get ahead if I know like I've got to work Wednesday night or something, and so I'll go and when I'm writing the show notes, I add block quotes into our show notes, and if there's like just a really good quote that isn't like reference specific that I can just like throw out there and people will get. That goes on Twitter. That goes into Buffer, and then like a day later, it'll come out. If I'll try to make it so that it buffers after the episode has come out, or like the day before. But next, you can use social media to keep up with the current trends in the industry. And I'm using the term industry kind of loosely here because, we're all developers, but industry could mean the .NET framework. It could mean, Ruby on Rails. It could mean Python. It could mean whatever area of coding you're in.
Yeah. And it can also mean whatever area, whatever industry that the company you work for is in.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
And I did this last week. There was a article that came out and it bounced around social media, and I can't even remember which platform I got it from. It was either Facebook or Twitter. It's one of those things where I was stuck on a programming problem and I just kind of got my phone and fiddled for a minute while I tried to think my way through it. Mm-hmm. And I saw an article on there that was the average cost of a data breach and just, how high that's gotten and how cheap it is to get a hijacked machine inside somebody else's network. It's like $5 or $6 for a hijacked server. And because we have a security product, and I was kind of dead in the water on what I was doing because I just hadn't quite gotten over the hump there, I wrote up a little short email and shared it with the marketing team, who then proceeded to post the thing on Facebook and Twitter and, just take it and run with it. And that was more valuable than anything else I could have done during that very short period when I was in between parts of code. And so you get a lot of things that are career opportunity advancers that are not necessarily language or framework specific.
Well, the key thing with that is you were looking to better the company you worked for.
Right.
You weren't doing it as a self-promotion, as a, hey, look what I found, look how awesome I am for doing this, but as a, hey guys, check this out because
it was totally not, hey, my name's Will, I'm a terrible sales guy. Would you like me to be more terrible?
Yeah.
That doesn't really work.
Yeah, exactly.
But, I just kind of wrote up my thoughts and went with it. And you'd be surprised how much actionable business intelligence is available just out there leaking around on the net.
Yeah. Well, I have under here, follow industry leaders and news sources, which I've said a couple of times, and I've picked up some habits from some of the other podcasters I listen to about repeating the important things. This is one of them. Podcasters, journalists, bloggers, ones in your area, your language, your industry that the company you work for is in. I've made some friends. I've actually started going through the becoming a data scientist stuff. Now, you've seen some of the conversations I've had with Renee, the host of that podcast.
Believe so, yeah.
Yeah, and it started off talking about podcasting and editing, and then I listened to a few of her shows, and she's really good. I mean, if you're interested in data science, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how you can make these friends. I mean, that's kind of how we got to know Saran and got involved with Code Newbie was through social media. Like, I listened to her podcast, I joined the Twitter chat, and then started talking with her. Then we met her when we were down in Atlanta, and that just sort of developed a friendship through that.
Yeah. It's a great way to do that. And it's also a good way to follow other people who are going in the direction you want to go. Mm-hmm. 'Cause I got several people that I'm like quasi Twitter stalking right now who have gone from a developer type role to one where they're doing a little bit of public speaking as well as development.
Yes.
And it's it's interesting, especially going back on their Twitter feed, watching what they've said in the past and, kind of the character arc, because that's something you can emulate.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Going right along with that, keeping up with current trends helps demonstrate your ability to your current employer, future employers, to remain current on what's going on in the industry. So have a list of influencers that you follow and be able to discuss new trends.
Yeah, and ask them questions.
Yes.
Go back and forth with them, like be visible.
One thing I've noticed, especially with Twitter and some of the other social media outlets that are more short form, is they love conversations.
Yeah, that gets you more than anything else you can do.
If you can start off with a few replies to tweets back and forth and then lead into, well, for me, it's led into some really interesting private conversations. And I've made a lot of friends, in the podcasting world from doing this.
Yeah. And I haven't done it as much, partially because of the job situation for me is reasonably secure. Mm-hmm. And at some point, the social media marketing at my level can be a little tricky to navigate because you don't want to spend so much time on social media that you look like that's what you do all the time. Because, you and I both know a guy who has done quite a bit of self-promotion on the clock while he's at work, and it doesn't go over well. He's getting a reputation locally.
I was going to say, he has a reputation because I've heard from people that aren't, in our circle about it. And it's just like, dude, you've got a reputation and it's not a good one.
Yeah. So you do have to be careful about that, and buffer and things like that can burn you if you're not careful.
That's
you're
true.
Overdoing it because it looks like you're constantly on.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about some of the dangers in a little bit too. But next, I want to talk about becoming a resource. And this is kind of what Will hinted at a little bit with what he's wanting to do is kind of move into a developer/speaker role. One of the steps that, from what I've seen people do, is becoming a resource on social media, leading to getting invited to come and speak.
Yep.
And start off with answering questions. Now, when you do this in places like Stack Overflow or on GitHub forums and stuff, make sure you look at the other answers before answering. Because if someone's already answered the exact way you're going to, or given the same answer you're going to give,
you're awarded no points.
Well, you're awarded no points and you look stupid.
Yeah.
You look like you weren't really trying.
Well, you looks inattentive.
Yeah. And this is hilarious because this happened to me today, like a few hours ago. I got on, and I was just mentioning earlier the Becoming a Data Scientist podcast. Well, she had posted kind of a 20 questions to guess who the next guest of the podcast is going to be. And so my first question was male or female. And what I didn't do was look to see if there had been other people asking questions, because there wasn't a thread, but apparently that other people had been asking questions. So I should have gone to her Twitter page and looked, but I didn't. I didn't look at, she posted this 22 hours ago either, because it just showed up because she's in my list. Like, I have a list of people. I'll talk about lists in a minute, but, it showed up and I was like, oh, hey, I can be one of the first people to reply to this. And then she wrote back, she's like, it's already been asked.
Yeah.
And the answer is female, and, check out the thread. And so I just wrote back. I'm like, when that happens,
own up to it.
Yeah, own up to it. I was like, oh, hey, I'm so sorry. My bad. I should have checked for questions before I asked one. And she was like, no big deal. But you got to ask one that hasn't been asked now.
Yeah.
It was just like a friendly banter after that. And so, if you do something like that, own up to it and just take responsibility for it. But seriously, though, just a 30-second glance, I would have seen that question had already been asked. And I did not take the time to do that, and that was my bad. Also, when you're answering questions, kind of bringing us back full circle here, is provide code samples if it's a coding question.
Yeah.
That is, when I'm looking through Stack Overflow for answers.
That's the only part I read.
Yeah. I look at that first, and then I read if I have trouble understanding what they're doing or saying in their code, then I'll go back and read what they wrote explaining it.
But like the scanning, that's the index points is what does the code actually say.
Yeah, exactly. Share interesting content. Again, this is another thing that depends on the platform. And I have on here no cat memes on LinkedIn.
Yeah, unless it's extremely clever. And that's awful hard to do.
There's been a lot of backlash lately on LinkedIn for people posting things because it's become more social.
Yeah.
Than professional, and
that's the way most jobs are going.
And there's been a lot of backlash from people posting non-professional stuff on LinkedIn. So to stand out or to make yourself look better, I would say on the professional sites, avoid the fun stuff.
Yeah,
and put that on Facebook, Twitter. That's fine.
Yeah, you can. I mean, I think you could be humorous. It has to be humorous and professional. Because I've seen some recruiters post some things that were hilarious, especially if you know how recruiting works.
Yes.
And it was completely within a professional context, and that works well. But it's a really hard line to toe, and if you're not good at it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've posted a few XKCD comics.
Yeah.
Which they're really great about being professional comedy. And so it's not inappropriate, and it's not, something that is completely off topic for what the platform is. Part of becoming a resource is developing your personal brand.
Yeah, and you and I've done this.
Yeah. This is how you appear to the world. And you're right, we have done this with our own blogs, with the podcast. Like I don't want to say we're known, but we go out and we meet people and they ask Will, where's his beard?
Yeah. And there's that part of it. A lot of it too is what you don't share and what you don't do.
Yeah.
As much as it is the things that you do. There's some people that you and I have also had interactions with where their personal brand is very off-putting.
Yes.
To us, and we interact with them socially, but we would not work with them because of their personal brand, because they're showing who they are, and it's not something we want to be around.
Yeah, and that's another great thing about social media is that not only can you display your personal brand, but you can see others and determine, I don't really want to work with them. I don't want to work at that company because, the atmosphere there is not one that is where I'm wanting to go.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even have to be a negative thing. It just could be, that what they're interested in, what they do is not what I'm interested in.
I love playing foosball at 9 o'clock in the morning while other people are trying to work. That's my favorite thing in the world. Seriously,
man.
If I ever see that as your personal brand, I'm not working with you.
And you have ruined me for any place that says they have a work hard, play hard attitude. Ever since that episode we did.
Yeah.
Every time I see that, I'm like it immediately knocks them down.
Yeah.
And I have to remind myself sometimes that it's the recruiter saying this and not the company.
Yeah. But
the recruiter's trying to make me want to work there by saying that, and I'm like, you're having the exact opposite effect.
The big thing is adding a human aspect to that image that you're building yourself. Like the fact that we kind of cut up and somewhat make fun of ourselves. Our email address is neckbeards@completedeveloperpodcast.com.
That's so true.
That adds a human element, but we don't take it to the level of cutting up to the degree that we do face to face. Mm-hmm. Because that's
we do that doesn't make it into the show.
Yeah, well, there is that. The best way to think of a personal brand,
it's really what you want to do is to present yourself in the best light possible.
Yeah,
without being fake.
Right. It's makeup, not a mask.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Of course, if you're a dude, that's totally different context, but it's realism enough, but with a positive spin, because everybody does anyway. Mm-hmm. The idea is to be the person that you want to seem, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense.
And maybe throwing off the brand of the person that you would like to be and that you're trying to be. Because eventually, if you do that long enough, that's who you will be. Mm-hmm. So some of the branding also is a self-guiding thing.
No. And finally, under becoming a resource, give more than you take. And the Sheps suggest giving 4 to 5 times the amount that you take. And my understanding from reading that was going back to where we talked about mixing your shares with your personal content and your self-promotion. So you really want to provide more value than you
extract.
Yeah. So,
the thing is, you're also providing value into an environment that is viral and it's one to many. Mm-hmm. So even if you are taking, you're taking a fifth of something that's not the same size as the 4/5 that you're putting out. It's 4/5 of X and 1/5 of Y.
Yes, exactly.
So it's just easy to scale what you get without screwing up on what you get.
The trick to this, and just the easy way to think of it, is focus on delivering useful content. Your own useful content or others' useful content. But your focus to become a resource in social media should be on useful content.
Yeah, well, if you're useful, you get hired.
Yeah.
Or you get listened to. I mean, that's a fundamental cornerstone, is if you can do these things properly, you're in great shape.
And speaking of getting hired, our next point is to talk about job postings. And one thing you can do is to look beyond job sites to company feeds on their social media platforms. Facebook and Twitter are areas that people don't think about looking for job postings, but sometimes companies may not post a position on a job board, but they'll mention it on social media. Or they'll mention it on social media a week or two before it gets posted.
Or the person that mentions it will be the hiring manager, not the HR person.
Yes.
And if you can get around HR, you really want to do that.
We need to have an entire episode on HR, not just in our industry, but in other industries,
and how their part of the game works.
Yeah. So basically, if you already follow the company and provide value, you're going to be known to the people there. You know, it's easier to hire someone known than someone unknown. I mean, I just look at where you work. You walked into the interview and sat down across from one of our good friends.
Yeah.
And I was just like...
Nailed it.
Yeah. You know, this doesn't mean you go stalking people where you want to work.
Obviously.
Yeah.
But you can take that word obviously either way.
Yeah, I know. But if you are known to people at the company, it will be easier.
Yeah.
It's about who you know sometimes more than what you know.
Well, and sometimes they'll come to you.
Yes. I've had that happen.
Yeah. Same here. Quite a bit.
And understand that when you apply to a job, when you interview, they are going to look you up on social media.
Oh, yeah. I totally do that every time I'm involved in an interview, because there's stuff that I look for.
The thing is, you can flip the script on them. You know, you can look the companies up too. And Will mentioned this earlier. I said we're going to talk about it. Now we are. You know, companies that you apply with, you know, you can do the same thing that they do and even look up the people you're going to be interviewing with. I know I do this where I look them up on LinkedIn and sometimes even on other social media.
Yeah. I prefer other social media unless LinkedIn is the only thing I can get, because LinkedIn will tell you who just looked at your profile.
Yeah, there's ways around that.
There are ways around it.
But yeah, it will. The thing is, I don't mind that if I'm interviewing with you.
Right. That shows diligence.
Yeah, it does. And so that's why I'll look at their LinkedIn profile once to learn and to show that I did look.
Yeah.
Usually I'll do it after they look at mine.
Right. That way you've got an excuse going, oh, who's this?
Yeah.
You know, and clicking through, and then it looks like you're paying attention. Mm-hmm. You just have to be careful about how those things look.
Well, if you look at theirs once, also a lot of times recruiters will send me a list of the people that are going to be interviewing me.
Yep.
And links to their LinkedIn profiles.
And I get the same thing with business situations too, where, you've got multiple people coming in from another company. Being able to research them helps a lot.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is something that you've mentioned a few times that came up almost in passing, where if you share a common interest, you can bring it up in the interview.
Yeah.
I know I had an interview not that long ago where the hiring manager had looked at my blog, and I interviewed with the team, and then he came in and I interviewed with him, and as they were leaving, he asked them, he's like, "So did you ask him about Doctor Who?" And they're like, "What?" And he's like, "You looked at his blog, right? And the crack in the wall?" And they're like, "Yeah, didn't know that was Doctor Who," because none of them were big Doctor Who fans. And my blog is subtly Doctor Who. And apparently he and his wife, big Doctor Who fans. So the first 5-10 minutes of the interview, he and I sat and talked about Doctor Who. And then some of my blog posts. And, you know,
it just warms people up a whole lot.
It does. I mean, it really turned what I thought was a rough interview into a good one, because, you know, he came in and wanted to know about my blog, and I'm like, oh, I can talk about this all day long.
Well, and the other side of it too is humanizing the interviewer helps a lot.
That's true.
It makes them act humane.
I don't want to get too in-depth into the specific platforms.
Especially because they change so much.
Yes, they do. I do, however, kind of want to go over the 3 basic areas, and we'll hit on some platforms in those areas, but there's social, professional, and then job boards. Those are your 3 basics. Under social, that's going to be like your Facebook, Twitter, Google+. You know, these are the places to post blog posts, cat memes, links to projects you've done, links to your portfolio, things like that. And then you get ones like Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, even Snapchat.
That are more media-based.
Yeah, they're more media-based, and this is where, like, you can post IoT projects on Pinterest.
Right.
You can post how-to on YouTube. And we're still debating on whether or not we want to put the podcast on YouTube.
Yeah, and the answer is probably no.
Yeah.
It's just we may put other content on there.
Yeah, we may. Yeah, we've had people request it. It's one of those things where it's been requested, but I don't think it would be good for our show to do that, because we have other content we want to put on there.
Well, that, and it's not appropriate for YouTube, because it's not audio-visual. It's audio.
Yeah, Will won't let me set up a camera in here to video us.
Yeah, you don't want to look at us while we're drinking beer, mostly. No. If you really want to look that much, you ought to be behind the beer.
Yeah. It depends on if we have a guest here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing is that's you've got to pick the right kind of platform, and those are all, they overlap to some degree, but
those are all specific, like media kind of platforms. And then you've got things like Reddit, which kind of cross
Reddit, Stack Overflow, places that are question answer type environments.
Well, the thing is, Reddit is more forums. Social, whereas Stack Overflow, GitHub, Bitbucket forums are. Reddit is like, I have it under social because it crosses from social into professional.
Yeah. And I mean, another thing you can do just for fun and entertainment is go on 4chan and tell people they can't hack your website. Not really.
And then give them somebody else's website you don't like.
Don't ever do that.
No, but Will brought up the Stack Overflow, GitHub, Bitbucket. These kind of blend the professional and the social, but it's better to stay professional on these. Yeah.
Well, in some, of course, you mentioned Stack Overflow. There's also other sites in the Stack Overflow network that are more or less, which is tricky.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I know. I just sort of, I don't want to list.
Yeah, they're hard to categorize anyway.
They are. But these sites are great for collaboration and asking questions. I would say, just like with answering questions, check and see if your question has already been answered or asked before asking it, because I can't tell you how many times because I always do this, and I'll find people asking questions, and then the second or third answer is like
a link
to the previous time it was asked, or and usually someone berating them for asking it and not looking.
Yeah.
It makes you look bad if you don't do the research. A simple search.
Yeah, if the search would turn something up. The other thing I do too is I look for the people that berate people on there, and I don't bother with them.
Well, no,
because that's also
that's not professional.
Not okay.
No, and there has been in the past some backlash for bringing up political and other like religious stuff on these sites, and if you wouldn't discuss it at work in a professional setting.
Assuming you're professional.
Yeah.
Because we all know a few of those too.
We do, that don't grasp the whole concept of, professional versus personal. That's a whole nother episode.
It is.
And, no, but if it wouldn't be appropriate at work, then don't bring it up on a professional site like these.
Yeah, and then there's controversial, honestly. Most of the time, that's just really not worth it unless you are trying to make something happen.
Yeah. And then there's the big dog under the professional sites, and that's LinkedIn. And this is basically an online resume. And this is a purely professional environment. Yeah, this is not a blend. This is...
Yeah, it's supposed to be purely professional.
Yeah, it's designed that way, and that's good.
Yeah.
Because that's needed. And finally, under professional places, I have communities, like the Code Newbie community. And there's a few others that I've been on. Like, there's a lot of really great learning communities out there.
Yeah, and there's some, for everything under the sun. Even, non-development stuff too. That's the crossover can be really.
I'm on a forum for Honda Shadow Riders, shadowriders.net, and it's specific for people who ride the make and model of motorcycle that I ride. And so, yeah, there's all sorts of them out there, but there are professional ones. And finally, job boards. Career Builder, Monster, Indeed, Glassdoor, etc., etc., etc. Because these come and go. You want to keep your resume up to date on the sites so that if you do get downsized or laid off, you're not scrambling.
Yeah, because it comes across as desperate.
Yeah, like Will said, he just updates his every,
2 or 3 months? I forget what it's actually set on.
Yeah, but that's really good because if things haven't changed in 3 months, then nothing needs to be really updated that much. If things have, like say he got a job, well then he puts it on there, and so when he goes, if he gets downsized or something, all he has to do is go on there and instead of having to put
slightly,
alter it to where it doesn't say, this date till present. It says the dates he worked there.
Yeah, although I do typically leave it to present until I have something else.
Well, yeah, that's like just a resume trick, but
I don't mess with that part.
No,
because a lot of times that can be a little bit more complex too.
So we've talked a little bit about what not to do, and we actually have an episode upcoming on what not to do on social media, because there's a lot, and we could go on the entire episode just on this.
Yes.
So wrapping this all up into a nice little package, you need to have a game plan. It's kind of what this episode is about, is helping you develop that game plan. But you should set aside time each day or each week for social media.
Yeah, just on a recurring, regular basis that you're comfortable with.
Yeah. Like, for example, the sample I found was have a different task for each day. So one day, work on your profile. Another one, join groups or, comment in groups. Yeah. Another, answer questions. And on another, ask questions. The big thing is don't do it all at once.
Right.
You want to spread this out. And you can set your content to post throughout the day via services like what we use, which is Buffer. But there's several different content posting services, from paid to free to freemium. Here at the Complete Developer Podcast and Will with Gant Software Systems both use Buffer.
Yeah, and we have separate accounts and all that.
Yeah.
And
Well,
CDP is still on a freemium, which we need to. I keep meaning to fix. Like I've been meaning to fix that for like 2 months, because the big thing with social media posts like this is it's sort of like manure. If it's spread around, it's fertilizer, and if it's in a pile, it's a big pile of manure.
Yeah.
And it's not helpful to anybody.
No, another one that I personally use for my blog and stuff, occasionally I've been playing around with it. I haven't really committed to it, is Hootsuite. What I like about it is you get these tabs. So I can have a tab that is all my personal stuff, and then a tab that is all my blog stuff, and a tab that is all my business stuff. And if I put the podcast on there, it'd be another tab that's only podcast stuff in that tab. It's really good at, separating those out. And finally, link your social media to your resume. Will just showed me that his Twitter... Buffer sent him a message saying that it's empty for his Twitter account.
Yeah, because I forgot to carpet bomb it yesterday.
But what I was saying, link your Twitter, your LinkedIn, GitHub to your resume. Don't link your Facebook page.
Yeah, please don't ever do that. Don't ever link your Facebook page.
Yeah.
Or if you have a unprofessional Twitter profile, like a whole lot of people actually have multiple profiles on these services as well for exactly this reason. And you also have some employers that believe that they have a right to access your social media accounts. You want to have a second account in case they just absolutely have to, and you are really in a bad spot financially.
I think there was some legislation to where they can't do that anymore, but they can have you make it completely private.
Yeah.
That's what I understand.
Right.
Because they were trying to do that and lawsuits got filed.
That's one of those things, like you do want to have the two accounts, and you can have one that's a public facing account for you and one that's a private, and don't cross the streams. Yeah.
That about wraps us up. Before we close everything out, I'm actually stealing tricks of the trade from Will. So each week, recruiters and human resources personnel do a search for new resumes on job boards like CareerBuilder, Indeed, Monster. And this little trick was shared with me by a recruiter to help me stay at the forefront of the stack. And that is, make a slight change in your resume each week on Sunday. Like, go in and pluralize a word.
Or reword it.
Yeah, or reword it. Don't really change what it is, but just make a slight change, and then upload that new resume to the career sites, so that on Monday, when human resources and recruiters look for fresh resumes, yours pops up. The change shouldn't be significant, but just enough to where the job board recognizes it as a changed resume. So that's what I got.
Stand by for Titanfall.
If you have a question or comment for us, please email us at neckbeards@completedeveloperpodcast.com. Our theme music is an excerpt from Stand By for Titanfall by Pure Bells, available on SoundCloud and licensed under Creative Commons. The intro music for IoTs is Hillbilly Hip Hop by Jason Belcher. For references, show notes, and to sign up to our email list, be sure and check out the website at CompleteDeveloperPodcast.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at CompleteDevPod and like our page on Facebook to keep up with the news about the show. Thanks for listening. See you next time.